grew up reading movie novelizations. They were very, very popular in the 70s and even into the 80s. And in fact, they were probably the first adult books that I read when you weren't reading just YA literature. And I loved them. I had a great time. I read novelizations for movies I never even saw. And so it was something about, what was it, about 3 years ago. I started thinking about them, and I still have a bunch of them. And so I dug them out and started going through them and thinking about, what a fun genre this is. And I started rereading some of the ones that I liked and reading some of the ones that I never got around to. And I go, wow, these are really cool. This is really, really fun. I should do one of these for my movie. For one of my movies. That would be a neat idea. That would be a nice thing. And then also, it even kind of goes in with my whole low art, high art thing, where I've always promoted exploitation movies and B movies. And right, the novelization is about the lowest form of literature that there is. It's like only filthy, dirty books. It's just a little bit lower than novelizations as far as most literary critics are concerned. So my first idea was maybe to do a novelization of Reservoir Dogs. Because I thought, it's a nice little crime gangster book. It would go right in the crime mystery section of a bookstore. It could be kind of perfect. And so I wrote the first couple of chapters of a Reservoir Dogs book, and then I thought, what the fuck am I doing? It should be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's the last thing I did. People seem to really like it. And it would probably do really well. Not only that, I had so much material. I'm not talking about a scene I shot that I didn't use in the editing. I'm talking about I did so much research on the characters, of finding out who they were and writing things that I knew would never ever make it into the movie, but would tell me who they are. It was a way for me to learn about Rick's career. It would be a way for me to learn about Cliff's past. It would be a way for me to understand Sharon's dynamic with Jay Sebring. And so since I had all this stuff that I knew would never be in the film, it was like, this is obviously the one. People would be interested in it. It has a lot of fans. And I just had a wealth of material. And it just also, the last little thing about it was, on one hand, it's a novelization of my movie, but on the other hand, it's also a Hollywood novel, and that's its own subgenre, novels about Hollywood. And I think this is a pretty good Hollywood novel. You have to not worry about a bad think piece. Actually, if you get a bad think piece, I didn't know this earlier on. I remember when I did Pulp Fiction, there was we got a tremendous amount of press that was very, very positive. But when something becomes that positive, then there's also a bit of a backlash on it. And so there was a whole series, like an art forum, had a whole series of think pieces that were really judging the film harshly. Not even judging the film harshly, pretty much just kind of saying, look, don't get so caught up in this guy. This guy ain't that special. This is kind of a fun movie, but this guy ain't all that. And so it's 4 really wordy articles written by 4 different people, all more or less saying the same thing. And I remember, at the time, reading it and thinking, Jesus Christ, man, I make a funny gangster film. What's your problem? But then, many, many years later, I found that magazine again. I mean, many, 10, 15 years later. I found that magazine again, and I reread those pieces. And they weren't any more flattering than they were the first time around. But I realized, no, Quentin, you can't get sensitive about stuff like this, and you can't take this kind of stuff personal. If your movie is actually becoming part of the conversation, if you've actually reached the zeitgeist, where your movie is actually something to talk about, it's not just 90 minutes or 2 hours, or in my case, 2 hours and 45 minutes usually. All right. A nice little entertainment to be forgotten about as soon as you leave. If it's actually going to make its mark, then you're going to have people who don't like it. And you're going to have people who are going to respond badly against it. And in a way, if you don't take it personal, they're helping you out. They are making a give and take. They're saying, actually, they are, for as unflattering as they are, they're saying your movie is worth talking about, simply by virtue of 10,000 words, right, to say it. And, and the point being is, no, that is one of the reasons why Pulp Fiction was such a thing, is, it had its strong defenders, and it had its strong people who were like, whoa, what the fuck? No, stop everybody, stop. Well, that's a conversation. That means your movie meant something. And now as time goes on, if you're filming something like Pulp Fiction, then it kind of doesn't get talked about that much anymore as far as that's concerned. It kind of owns its spot on the shelf. But the way it gets to that spot on the shelf is because it was a vital piece of work that people applauded and they didn't. So thus, consequently, though, you got to have the balls to actually handle that. You got to have the balls to have people call you names, and people not like the movie, and people write bad think pieces. You'll get through it. Screw it. It's fine. All right. That's part of the conversation. And you have to remember, one of the legacies of Pulp Fiction is, yes, I think we're in an incredibly repressive time right now. But the 80s was just as oppressive. It just had a slightly different personality than now. And you could say the permissiveness of the 90s, when the pendulum swung back, Pulp Fiction was a big part of that. So thus, I was still dealing with a movie-going public and a press that was still coming from a 1988 perspective when I did Pulp Fiction. So, if they had already gotten there to where they, to where the press was like when Seven came out, if the press was already there when if Pulp Fiction came out 4 years later, it wouldn't be the same response, at least as far as like the outrage from the people who didn't respond to it or the bad think pieces. I think I got a little too rambly, but that's the 8,000 cinemas. I don't know. And it all remains to be seen. But I do know that I feel very lucky that we did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in 2019, because it does feel like I'm the bird that flew through the windowsill just as the window slammed shut, and practically caught my tail feathers in the window. And as far as Kill Bill 3 is concerned, I have no idea what my 10th movie is going to be. That's a possibility.